Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show, a podcast for tired parents who are searching for a bit more sleep the caring way. I'm your host, Kerry Secker, infant sleep consultant, founder of my unique sleep approach, Care It Out, and your caring sleep supporter. I really hope you'll join me on my mission to get Smalls a settled night's sleep without the tears, training or techniques. I love talking about sleep and I can't wait to share my sleep subjects with you. My approach to getting you more sleep is simple, straightforward, but above all, it's got to make sense and feel best for you. Ready to get more sleep? Then let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show. You are listening to your host, Kerry Secker. I hope you are really well. And in this podcast episode, I am doing a sleep series on sleep at a set age or stage. I've been talking recently about the fourth trimester. I've been talking about 4-month regression. Got a podcast episode on both of those. If you're interested, I'll put them in the show notes. And today, all this week on Instagram and Facebook, and this week's podcast episode is all about sleep at 6 months because there's so much pressure. We're going to really crack into this, but I was talking with our guest before that there is so much pressure around the 6-month mark to get your baby sleeping through or consolidating those naps. I'm hoping it's going to be a really useful podcast, not only for our wonderful guests we've got on, but also to everybody listening. Today, I am going to be talking to Emma, who's a mum of 6.5-month-old Lucas, and sleep is a little bit sticky at the moment. So I'm hoping to chat to Emma, and hopefully she's going to get lots out of it for her and her son Lucas, and hopefully you will find that everybody listening will get something out of it. It's all I ever want. How are you, Emma?
Good, thank you.
Amazing. Welcome to the Sleep Show. Thank you so much. I know it's very last minute as always, but thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you, and I know that everybody, what I try to do a mix of podcast episodes where it's just me with a guest, consultation types, and every time I do I haven't done one for a while, but every time I do, they always go down really well. People love to hear about other people, Emma. They're keen to hear about you, but also I think they're just really relatable, aren't they? Yeah, definitely. So tell me a little bit. You've got a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah, so Lucas was born in September.
Yeah.
So obviously in and out of lockdown. So he started off sleeping relatively well for a newborn. Started going longer stints, but then sort of after 4 months we started getting some shorter stints, and then as time's gone on between sort of 4 months and now, it's just got shorter and shorter and shorter to the point where he doesn't seem to be able to go at night longer than 2 hours before waking up. And that happens throughout the night.
So every 2 hours he's waking up at night time.
So every 2 hours, So he starts off, so he goes to bed at about 7:30. Sometimes he had started off and then not waking up till 9, and then it was 11 after that. But then he started going, so he'd wake up at 8 o'clock and then he'd wake up at 9 o'clock. So some nights it was shorter periods in the first part of the night, and then it would religiously be every 2 hours after that. But it's gone back to being sort of every 2 hours religiously throughout the night as soon as he's gone down.
Yeah, okay. What I'm going to do is we're going to go through a little bit of Lucas's background, because before I make any suggestions, I always like to get everything into context and know everything about the baby or the family who I'm going to be making suggestions. We'll come to that, but before we do, I just want to talk about frequent wake up at night time, because I see this so much in practice. I think it's probably the most frequently asked question and the most frequent thing I work with parents for, frequent wake ups at night time. And how I look at frequent wake ups at night time is that my approach is I'm always going to reassure you that it is normal for your baby not to be sleeping through the night, even after 6 months old. So much pressure, which we'll come on to in a second, about your baby needs or should be sleeping through by a set age, and that age I don't know where they've plucked it from, but a lot of pressure around the 6-month mark. But it is natural and normal for your baby not to be sleeping through the night at this age or stage, at any age or stage, but especially 6.5 months. And waking up at night time to have needs and feeds is very normal as well. But balance comes up a lot on my approach, and I really do feel it is a balance, because you don't need me to tell you, Emma, that waking up every 2 hours
must be, I don't know how it feels for you, and I would never assume that, but it must be tough, tiring. It can start to impact everything, the way you want to parent, your mood, diet, like everything, family logistics, everything. So yes, I'm always going to reassure that it is natural, normal. Wake up to normal, not sleeping through the night is normal, because for some families, all they needed to hear. And first and foremost, I'm always here for the reassurance. But if the wake ups or the feeds are super frequent, they're unsustainable, they're starting to have an impact, you don't feel they're sleeping to the best of their ability, chances are there are some changes that we can make with care that can make a difference. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that's so important. I think sometimes people think care it out is wait it out, and waiting it out, I 100% do believe that 100% of children, babies, infants, whatever we like, smalls, whatever we like to call them, will eventually learn to sleep. But we don't know how long that is going to be, and waiting is the worst. However, for some families, waiting it out is working for them, and if it's working, all is well. Some families do choose to do sleep training, and I'm always going to be an advocate of that. You know your family best, you are their expert, so if you choose to do that, that's fine. However, I'm somewhere loitering in the middle. I'm not, care it out isn't about, oh, you just got to accept it and wait it out, but neither am I going to tell you to cry it out either. It's a combination of making what is natural and normal, going with what Lucas is like his biological best, what he's capable of, but hopefully it's care it out, it's a compromise for both of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds fabulous.
I think it's such an important message to get across, that if things aren't working, chances are there's something we can do. Okay, before we get started with Lucas, I just want to, what we were talking about before, Emma, because I think it's such an important point you made, and you felt it too, you were saying, but that pressure at 6 months, it's real, isn't it?
Yeah, because you think they're no longer classed as sort of like newborn, are they? So during like newborn stage, you expect them not to be able to sleep for long periods of time, or to be disturbed several times in the night. But obviously you get to like 6 months, and I don't know where the assumption comes from that they should just be able to, because they're older and they're bigger and they can do other things and they start weaning, and that they should be able to then sleep through the night. Yeah. But when that doesn't happen, it's sort of just a bit of a shock, especially because if you've got other children like I have, when he slept through with no problem, by 6 months he was sleeping through, and then when Lucas wasn't, it was kind of a bit like, oh, what do I do? What is there something wrong? Have I done something wrong? Am I not doing something right? Is it, it is a bit of a shock sometimes.
Yeah, and parenting is so personal. It's hard not to internalize that as, what am I doing wrong? Why is my baby not sleeping? It must be me. I call it the 6 month switch. That's a mouthful. And there is so much pressure around. I think there's pressure on parents at any age or stage, but I really see that pressure gets to a peak at around 6 months, because as I mentioned before, there's this number, 6 months, this arbitrary number, that all babies should be sleeping through the night by that time. They shouldn't need a night feed. Naps should be consolidated. What's the other one? Sleep is settled, is becoming more settled at night time. And I just don't like the word should. You've been following me for a while, Emma. I think swapping the word should for some baby, there isn't a switch that gets switched on at six months where every single baby is able to sleep through the night, not need feeds, start to consolidate their naps, and are overall a bit more settled, because they're all really different. And I think sometimes swapping the word should for some can really, really help. And the other thing is, which I've completely, I know what I was going to say, is that around this age, big changes are happening to sleep. Their circadian rhythm or sleep system is starting to mature a little bit. And that can help with consolidating naps. So some babies at this age do start to nap a little bit longer, reduce their naps down. Some don't. Some babies are they start to produce melatonin on a bit more of a regular schedule. And that means for some babies, their nights do get a little bit more settled. They can consolidate too, but it's definitely not a switch that boom gets switched on at 6 months. No. It can happen anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 months. And it really does look different to every baby. And I really want to get that message. Somebody needs to make me a t-shirt with "it depends on the baby," because I'm that 1,000 times a day. But I think listeners will be very, reassured to hear that you felt that pressure too. Do you think it's hard, a bit of a personal question, and you can tell me to stuff it if you don't want to answer it, but do you think you felt more pressure because you second baby? I guess that's hard to answer now I've said it out loud.
I think so, yeah, because it sounds a bit so I was when I was a first mum with my older son, I was very laid back. Like, my friends would joke about it, like how laid back I was for a first time mum, and said that with the second one you'd constantly forget he was there because you're that laid back with the first one. Whereas for me, it seems to have gone the other way, and I'm more, because he is so different and because he's not done things in the same order and in the same way as his older brother, it's kind of made me sort of falter a little. And I'm not like a person who's overly self-conscious about things, but it has made me question things because he's not done things in what sort of you're told or you're led to believe is the right order, or he's not done things by a certain time. And he is so different from his older brother that you sort of, it does make you think, oh, have I done something wrong this time? Or is there something going on? It's just because I would have thought it would have been easier with the second one, but it's actually harder.
Yeah, maybe Lucas heard you when you said that the first one was easy and you were really laid back. I promise you, if you take anything away from this session, and I hope you take so much more away from it, I really hope you know that you aren't doing anything wrong. It's so hard not to compare siblings. Especially siblings, it's hard not to compare our babies with other children, especially when it comes to siblings, and that can become such a shock that two children that you parent pretty much the same can be completely different. Just goes to show how many layers there are to sleep. Okay, let's get on, and because I really want you to take your time to come on and talk today, I really want you to take a plan to put in place for Lucas. So before we start, I always like to just double check how things are going. So I just want to triple check before we start, is there any weight concerns?
No weight concerns.
No. And no reflux? Any reflux?
No reflux.
No, amazing. And he's in good health?
Yes. He has eczema, which irritates him.
Yeah.
But apart from that, no, everything else is fine.
Amazing. I'm always very honest and upfront, and I'm not medically qualified. I work with the biological side of infancy, which is completely different. And I really feel it's really important for any practitioner to stay in their scope of practice. So I don't feel that I am qualified to give advice on eczema, but I can give some very quick tips. For anybody listening, if you are worried about eczema, I highly recommend getting in contact with your doctor or a dermatologist. I'll put the name of a really good one in the show notes for you. But eczema is a medical matter that I would always refer you on to your medical team to have a look at. And from a sleep perspective with eczema, there are a couple of things that you can do that can help. It's very rare that eczema on its own would impact sleep unless it was really severe and it covered quite a lot of the body. Does he wake up scratching at night time?
Yeah, he does. It tends to irritate him more. When he was younger, it tended to be more his face. And obviously doctors aren't keen on prescribing antihistamines when they're quite young. But we did get some prescribed because it was waking him up so much, and it was his face that he was constantly itching. To the point where we had to put socks over his hands rather than just use the little mittens that are attached to the onesies, because he managed to get his fingers out. But he's quite a tactile child, so he likes to touch a lot of things, and then he likes to put his hands in his mouth to help him soothe, even though it doesn't always work. So we've tried to take them off over time, and he's kind of used to not scratching as viciously now. But as he's getting older, his eczema starting to irritate him sort of on his tummy, on his chest, on his neck. So he started going for those areas now as well.
It's like us, if we were in discomfort, like scratching, like any discomfort, or there was something irritating us, it would impact our sleep. It would bother us at night time, particularly a tickly cough or scratching or itching at night time. it's understandable that that can impact the sleep. So generally speaking, something like eczema, my suggestion, as I mentioned before, always check in with your doctor. And some tips for this sleeping, eczema and sleep, would be to try and keep the room as cool as possible. Eczema hates heat. The more heat there is in the skin, the more chances that they are going to scratch. Keep the cotton pajamas. I'm sure you're already doing this, Emma, but for anybody listening, going through something really obvious sometimes can get missed. So keep the room cool. Cotton pajamas next to the skin. Anything that isn't a natural fibre. Polyester, what's the other one? Lycra, that likes to go in pajamas. That's really going to irritate and warm the skin, so try to avoid those. Other things are file the nails down. We were talking before that sometimes those little nails, they can be like little weapons, can't they? They can really hurt and cause quite a bit of damage. So keeping, I found, rather than clipping, like trying to clip someone else's baby's fingernails, honestly, anybody trying to with the big clippers clip the nails, it's a frightening thing, isn't it? Even
it is quite scary, yeah.
So I found having a buffer, like a little nail file and a buffer, and they would sit there and I would do the nails like that. As you said, putting socks on, that can help as well. And there's just a few things there that can help. But ultimately, if the eczema is bothering them at night time, it is worth seeing another practitioner to get that as under control as much as possible, because whilst they are itching and scratching and it's bothering them at night time, it's understandable that it's going to bother them. They're going to cause them to wake up at night time. Do you, like, parental instinct is, there's nothing like it. Do you feel it's the eczema bothering him at night time?
I do feel it's his eczema that bothers him at night time, yeah, because, well, yes and no. He always wakes up crying. He doesn't just, so he's not one of these babies who just like will ping wide awake and his eyes are open, he's quite happily babbling. He always wakes up crying. And I think it's, my oldest son does it, he wakes up crying sometimes because he's annoyed that he's had to wake up.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And he doesn't seem to, it does seem to bother him, less so now. Because I was watching him this morning, funnily enough, and he was itching, but he was asleep.
Yeah.
So like he was sort of like automatically going for his neck to give it a scratch, but he was still asleep. Whereas previously, it was disturbing him quite a lot, and he was that was what was waking him up.
Yeah. I don't know how you feel about alternative therapies, or I don't know where, again, I'm not medically qualified and I can't stress that enough, but it might be worth getting in touch with a dermatologist and just seeing whether there's anything else that can be done. And it's always worth getting a second opinion, I think. Yeah,
definitely, because he has got, it does cover quite a large portion of his body, and it's all dry, which is what's making him itch.
Yeah.
Literally, you take his onesie off and his vest and shake it, and it looks like it's been snowing. It's so dry.
Yeah, I really feel, again, you're his expert. I would never assume that I knew him better than you do or what he needed, but I do feel it might be worth getting in touch with somebody that specializes, like a dermatologist, that could help with that, get it under control as much as possible, because everybody Googles everything. I've definitely diagnosed myself with all sorts of things by going on Google, but actually going to somebody, and there's nothing like going to someone that is an expert in their field and getting advice to you and to Lucas. I think that'd be really useful.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got the name of someone, I'll put it in the show notes. And then I just wanted to reassure you that it is completely normal. Like, I know Lucas might not be giving you this impression because he's up frequently at night time, but I do believe babies want to sleep their biological best, and they want to sleep nicely at night time. And when they do wake up, sometimes they are annoyed or peed off or frustrated that they're awake. They sometimes don't even know why they're awake, or sometimes they know something bothers them, and they are annoyed that they've woken up, and sometimes that's really visible. And it's also very normal. Some babies do, like, again, depends on the baby, every baby's so different. Some babies do just wake up at night time and coo and, come on in and get me, I'm awake. Where some others are literally, it's like the sleep siren at night time. They wake up immediately crying, and that's complete. Crying at any time is completely normal. This is care it out, not control crying or leaving them to cry. But it's not ever been about muting their cries. Crying is completely normal. It's the only way Lucas can communicate. He's 6.5. He doesn't have 6.5 months old. He doesn't have words. He can only communicate by crying. So yes, it's horrible listening to them cry at any time of the night, but it is normal that they wake up at night time and cry and let you know that they need you. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong either, which I think is important. Okay, I do feel that your two reasons, I do feel we need to take the eczema into consideration, because you got his expert, you saying that you feel that he is in discomfort at night time. I still feel there's lots we can go through. We're going to go through his naps, his bedtime routine, bedtime boundary, what's happening at night time, just to see whether there's any other tweaks or sleep suggestions we can make. But I do think it is worth just seeing if there's anything more that can be done with the eczema. Does that make sense? And are you happy with that?
Yeah, definitely. It sounds great.
Yeah. Does it cover more than a 50? I think it does, but I just want to check. Does it cover more a 50p piece on his body? Like it's quite big, all over?
The dry skin is all over pretty much. The eczema patches that are more red and raw are, yes, there are quite a few of them that are bigger than a 50p piece at the moment. Yeah,
and also just I know I went through it before, but specifically for him, do you double layer him up at night time, like vest and then pajamas?
Yeah, but he's got a really good trick of he manages to get his legs out of his onesie regardless.
He's like a little Houdini.
He can get them out, so you take him out of his sleeping bag and his legs are just out.
That's so funny.
I don't know how he does it. I genuinely don't know how he does it. He managed to force his legs, and they're quite chunky, through the tiniest gap between the poppers, and then he's just got them. Then they're just out.
That's so funny. Listen, there is nothing wrong with a chunky thigh.
No, of course not. But I don't know whether he's doing that because his legs are itching, so he's rubbing them together and then they come out. So then he's sort of cleverly trying to cool himself down because he's getting his legs out. But then he always ends up cold. So I'm like, I don't understand.
I would, when it's normal to worry, that again, it's normal for parents to worry, full stop. But it's one of a really common worry is that they're getting too hot at night time or they're getting too cold. You're more likely to overheat a baby at night time than them being cold. And it's normal for their face, hands, feet to be on the chilly side. But most babies do prefer a cooler sleeping environment of between 16 to 19 degrees, which is, I call it cardigan cool. It is quite chilly. But it might be worth just sometimes finding something that works for you. It's a bit of a trial and error. It might be worth seeing whether having just one layer on him works. Maybe shorter pajamas would help him. I'm trying to think of other things off the top of my head. Instead of having like long pajamas, he could try and wear short pajamas. One layer, trying to get, it's hard because there's things in life we can control and things in life we can't control, and room temperature, especially UK summer, is really tricky to do that. But keeping him on the cooler side at night time might help. And the other thing I was going to suggest, which is just gone because my brain goes too quickly, is at night time, if you are worried he's too cool, check his chest and his back of his neck, and if his chest is warm, he's warm. But it is interesting, he's busting out of his PJs.
I have thought of this before, is to maybe go to the one layer.
It's just more like, I know I had really bad eczema when I was a child, and I still remember it quite vividly, and just having lots on your skin, it used to drive me bonkers, to the point even now I can't wear socks or trousers in bed. I have to have my feet out the duvet.
I'm very similar. My eczema was terrible when I was a child, and his brother, funnily enough, also likes to sleep. His bedroom's like a fridge, his older brother. Windows open slightly all year round. And he sleeps in shorts and t-shirt, or just shorts, regardless of the weather.
So that could be a similarity. He was very different. Lucas sounds very different from his big brother, but that could be a similarity there worth investigating, like being a little detective. Okay, and any other questions about that? Were you happy to go on?
No, I'm good.
Cool. So taking his eczema into consideration, I still feel it is worth, I don't want to end it just there. I want to go through his naps, his bedtime routine, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So my whole approach, even though I know, Emma, that you might not be giving this impression at night time, I've said it before, they do want to sleep quite nicely at night time. Especially because he's waking up and you're telling me, his expert, he's visibly annoyed when he wakes up. He doesn't want to be awake or bothered any more than you do.
No.
And frequent wake-ups at night time, they're causing you an unsettled night's sleep, which is why you probably you wouldn't believe how many, probably can believe how many messages I got to come on the podcast. They're still coming in this morning. I'm like, it went in about 10 minutes. But I will be doing another one. But the wake-ups at night time, they're causing you a sleepless night, which is why we're here. But they're not actually the cause of Lucas's sleepless night. Try to look at the wake-up, they're a symptom of something that's going on in his setup, or something we need to take into consideration. So for me, it's I've got itching now. It's always back to a little question mark over his eczema, and I do think it's worth exploring that a little bit more. But I also feel that it's worth looking at setting up a sleep cycle so that when he wakes up, he is able to get himself back to sleep at night time, unless he needs a feed or he is actually in discomfort from the eczema. What does get him back to sleep at night time when he wakes?
So we've tried several things. It used to only be me. I had to feed him back to sleep. And then then we got to a point where he would let Dad bounce him back to sleep, sort of in between me feeding him. So I would do one, then Dad, this is when it got like to every 2 hours, and it was unsustainable for me to be waking up every 2 hours, and it had made me sort of quite ill. I got really run down with it. So then I did one feed to put him back to sleep, and then he would let Dad bounce him back to sleep. But we've gone backwards again now, and he literally sounds like a cat being strangled if his dad goes in the room and doesn't bring him to me, or if his dad tries to settle him down. He won't have anybody else do it. It has to be me, and I have to feed him to sleep, because I've tried bouncing him to sleep and he had let me do that a few times, but now it's a no-go area. It's feed me to sleep or nothing.
Yeah. And once he has the feed, is he going back to sleep quite quickly? Does he itch when he's feeding?
No, he's not itching when he's awake. When he's woken in the night, it seems to have calmed down sort of that ish in the night time at the moment. Like I said before, he tends to just sort of do it unconsciously now. I've no idea what per se necessarily is waking him up in the night. I just know it's religiously every 2 hours. He will feed and he will go back to sleep. So sometimes he does feed for a longer period of time, but more often than not, it is quite a short period of time, and it's literally sort of using me as a dummy, if you will, to help him go back to sleep. I've tried to give him a dummy as well. He's not having that.
Yeah, makes sense. And it is completely normal for them, like, again, it is completely normal for a 6-month-old to have feeds at night time. Anywhere between 1 or 3 is still very, very age appropriate. And again, there's always a spectrum on that. Some might be less, some might be a little bit more. Every baby's different, depends on the baby. But I think when it becomes really super frequent, I think it's worth looking at some things during the day. How does he feed during the day? Does he feed frequently during the day, and is there plenty of wet nappies?
Yeah, he used to feed, so he's kind of cut down a little bit because we've started weaning, and because he is so nosy at the moment. He's sort of so distracted in the day that he's not feeding as regularly as he used to. But before the last couple of weeks, he would feed sort of regularly, sort of every 4 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was fine, and there was loads of wet nappies and everything like that.
Yeah, it's very, very normal to get, I call it food FOMO. In fact, it's really common. I've got a post planned, I think it's either today, funnily enough, or Friday, about food FOMO. It can happen at any age, but it's more common when they're going through a little bit of a leap. So around the 4-month progression, or even around 6 months when they're starting to roll, they're starting to really clock on what's going on around them. And it's natural that nosing becomes their priority. And they can get a little bit of food FOMO during the day. Now, it's really important. Food, everything is linked for babies. So food, behaviour, going to the toilet, digestive system, sleep is all linked, which is why I look at everything. I have a very holistic approach, and I look at 4 areas. You can't look at one without the other. But food during the day, I don't believe that you need to stuff them during the day, and that's going to be the key to settled night sleep. I actually had dietitian Lucy Neary come on I can't even remember when it was now. Time has just been a bit of a blur in lockdown, but it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, came on and talked us through that. But I do think it is worth having a look. I don't want to put more pressure on you to say, right, you've got to get loads of feed to him during the day, because again, we've got no control over that. But sometimes things that can help food FOMO are taking them away from the action to feed, trying to get them to feed when, you know, they're in the middle of a party, there's lots going on, it's going to be hard. Just the same for me, I can't work if I'm in a cafe or there's loads, I've got my husband running in and out all the time doing stuff. It's really tricky to like focus on what you're doing. So taking him somewhere calm and quiet can help. Singing, chatting, you know, keeping the feeds really social can help. Just keeping it calmer when they're feeding, that can help. And sometimes if you notice that they are a little bit distracted during the day, some families really like nursing beads as well. You could use any necklace that they fiddle with, that can help as well. And again, I can't stress, it's not about focusing on getting loads of food into him or pushing those feeds on him. It's just giving him the best chance to do that. Does that make sense? And it won't always be possible. Some days it's going to be impossible, but doing that sometimes makes a difference.
Yeah, that's what we try to do sort of as it comes sort of towards, you know, like past 4 o'clock. I'll take him up because I'll pick my son up from school, and I'll take him upstairs and I'll feed him upstairs away from all the like from the noise and things.
Yeah.
And he does tend to like take it better then.
Yeah.
Whereas sort of like lunchtime-ish and thing around that time, he's so nosy, it's unbelievable. So
yeah.
But yeah, I do try and take him away so it's somewhere quieter for him to like make sure he's concentrating and he's not forever nosing around.
Yeah, again, we can only do our best, and that is always good enough as far as I'm concerned. You've got 2 children, we can't just sit in a dark room all day and not making conversation trying to get them to feed. But where you can, I like the word when and if you can, sometimes that can really help, because reverse cycling is quite common where at this age where reverse cycling is simply where they're having more milk at night time than they are during the day, and food FOMO can be a big part of that.
Yeah, because he definitely did do that for about a week stint. He was having more milk at night than he was in the day.
Yeah, it's normal, and it goes like most things with feeds and infants and babies, it can fluctuate, and sometimes it's not about stopping them from feeding day or night, it's just very slowly trying to shift the booby balance back.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, what I'm going to do now, if it's okay with you, Emma, I would like to go through, I look at 4 areas to get to a settled night's sleep or work on frequent wake-up. I look at 4 areas, which are naps and bedtime routine, bedtime boundary, what's happening at night time. Are you familiar with these at all?
Yeah, so I've got the bedtime boundaries one.
Yeah.
And we started to work through that, but weren't able to, because he literally goes from one extreme to the other. So where you've talked about ramping up your responses, and then I watched one of the clips on what was it called now? Trying to take the boob away from them like quicker, or trying to like and then give it them back if they ask for it, and then and things like that. So I've tried several different things, but he's the world's most awkward baby.
It's completely normal, and I think, again, we were talking about this before, I think it's really important to address. I try my best to create really useful content that's going to help, but I'm always very honest, I don't tout it as a guarantee or given. Lots of families move forward from the e-courses, which I'm always happy to hear. But of course, it comes back to that some families do get a bit stuck. They do need a little bit more support, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, well, you're never doing anything wrong, or even it's the wrong approach for them. Though again, I'm always very honest, I don't believe that there's a one size fits all approach for anything. That includes Care It Out. But sometimes it's about looking at other things before that, making sure that their naps are balanced during the day, that they're not overtired at bedtime. So we'll go through that in a second. And then for some babies, there's a real, like most things in life, there's a real balance, isn't there? Like most parents choose my approach because we are trying to limit the tears, and the trade-off of that is time. It takes a bit more time, but sometimes going super slow can actually, I found that actually it can be more frustrating for babies. So sometimes that it's not about being brave or being gung-ho, but sometimes giving it a go and making a bigger change, they actually accept it a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely.
Because they're not getting as frustrated. So that definitely happens. I hope this is coming across. I'm a very honest and transparent person. And it's normal for, if you've got the equals out there and it hasn't worked, or you've found it hard to make changes, you're still not doing anything wrong. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your baby. You are not alone. It's completely normal. It is impossible because every baby's different, and it's impossible. Every family, every baby's completely different. There isn't a one size fits all sleep story. It's impossible to make a piece of content that is just going to work for every single person. If somebody did that, they would honestly be a multimillionaire.
True.
And I would have my charity. I really want to Care It Out charity, and I would be doing all this for free if I made millions. So that's never going to happen. And some families do need a little bit of support to nudge you forward. And I'm always honest, some babies, they just Care It Out approach just isn't for them. But that sounds really doom and gloom. It isn't. I'm still quietly confident, Emma, that we can make some changes by looking at his naps, looking at his bedtime routine, looking at his bedtime pantry. How does that sound?
Sounds excellent.
Cool. Let's crack on, because I'm very aware of time. Time goes very quickly when you're talking. How do you feel his naps are going?
So his naps are quite regular. But he is one of these babies who sort of has to sleep on the go, if you will. So he has a nap first thing in the morning. We take his brother to school. Yeah. So we leave the house at about 8:45, and he will normally have fallen asleep by the time we get back. I'll go on like a walk with him after I've dropped his brother off at school. Yeah. So he's normally asleep by about sort of any time between 9:10 and 9:30. Because he normally wakes up at the same time. He'll be asleep, and he'll do sort of like a half an hour, 45 minute sleep, but he does have to be on the go. So he does have to keep moving. So if I get back to the house and he's asleep, I'll keep the buggy moving. Yeah. And then for his afternoon, and then he will wake up sort of after half an hour, 45 minutes. And then his afternoon nap, which is normally his longer one, again, he does normally need to be still on the move for it, but he's quite happy to sleep. So I'll either go to the shop, or I'll either go for a walk with like my other half, or take the dog for a walk when you would normally do a longer one. And he'll sleep for anywhere between 2 to 2.5 hours quite happily normally. But again, he has to be on the go. If I come back and leave the buggy, he'll wake up within about 15 minutes. Yeah. And then he'll do sort of, normally he'll have to have like a mini cat nap, sort of tea time-ish.
Yeah. And how long's that for?
I try not to make it any longer than half an hour, because obviously then it pushes his bedtime quite late. So he'll normally go to bed at about 7, half 7. So his cat naps normally for half an hour, anytime between 4:30 and 5. Yeah. For about he normally wakes up himself, to be fair, after about half an hour. Yeah. Because I'm sat still normally for that one as well. So that'll be like a contact nap. So I'll be sat still for that one. So he'll normally wake up after half an hour. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. What time's he up in the morning, Emma? It sort of fluctuates normally. So it's any time between sort of 6 and 7. He starts to stir at about 5:30. But I'll normally bring him in with me, feed him, and he'll fall back asleep again. Yeah. And I'll just leave him in bed with me. So normally so he did that this morning. He slept through till 7:15. Yeah. But normally he rouses between 6 and 7. Yeah, makes total sense. Lots of positives about his naps, Emma. I think some naps, nothing on my approach is precise or perfect, and that includes naps. Any nap gaps, any timings, they're always a guide, and for me it's always important to get it into context for your baby. I do feel like nap needs at around 6 months vary greatly. Some babies will have lower nap needs during the day, and if you were going to compare them to the baby books or their baby buddies, you might feel that they're not getting enough sleep. And some still very much need an hour in the morning, 2-hour chunky lunchtime nap, and a top-up nap. I don't set at 6 months they've got to sleep at this set time for this set length, because they're all really different. Some that I tend to work in windows, I much prefer.
that approach. And nap needs at this age vary anywhere from 2 hours, sometimes a little less, all the way up to 3.5 hours. It's really important to look at the baby. But I do feel there's lots of positives about his naps. There's a rhythm to them. He roughly has one at 9:30. He has one at lunchtime, which is getting a really chunky nap, and then he has a cat nap, and then he's going to bed okay. I actually feel his naps are nailed. Not that it's got anything to do with me, but I actually feel his naps are nailed.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, because I mean, the chunky nap that he normally has over lunchtime, sometimes if we've not gone anywhere, or sometimes it's only an hour, sometimes he'll have, like, the smaller 30-minute ones over the day. But he's still quite happy to normal it, because he still has the first one and he'll definitely still have the last one. So it's just sometimes the one in the middle will either be the chunk of 2 hours or will be broken slightly, but it doesn't seem to affect him still going to bed at night.
I don't think it's coming from, I think whatever's going on at night time, I don't think it's coming from his naps.
Right.
Because I've been honest, I don't think there's anything more we can do. Going through the wake up time, again, I don't believe that they are going to do everything to the dot on the daily. That's impossible. And I don't believe he's got to be up at a set time every day. Again, it's that window of between 6 and 7. I'm ever the optimist, so I'm hoping that we can start to nod him more towards 7. I don't believe that they've got to be up at a set time, but ideally they're awake within a half an hour, 40-minute max window, which he is just about, which is fine. I wouldn't recommend waking him any earlier.
No.
I tried. There are times when I would wake a baby. It's not in this instance, because you're just going to get up even earlier and earlier and earlier. And it is normal for their wake up window to fluctuate. For anybody listening, if it fluctuates, if their wake up is wildly different, like one day they're waking up at 6 and one day they're waking up at 8:30, that would be a time that I might suggest. Would never tell you what to do. That's not my style at all. But I might suggest then waking them up, like splitting the difference and saying, right, if they're not awake by 7:30, 7:45, waking them for the day, because nobody wants to wake a sleeping baby, and I would only suggest it if I thought it'd make a difference. But waking them at a set time to start their day can help with their circadian rhythm, and it can help all the naps to follow as well. But I think Lucas's wake up time is fine. His first nap of the day, it's working for you. Oh, and I just wanted to reassure you that naps on the move, completely normal. Naps, where or how they go to sleep, I'm not concerned I'm very rarely concerned, to be honest. You want to be concerned if I say I am concerned, but I'm not concerned where or how they go down for the nap. The most important thing at nap at this age is they are having them, which he is, and if they're working for you, we don't need to change that at all. The only thing I'd like to just offer a little bit of reassurance to you, Emma, or anybody listening, that it is normal for them to wake so for example, if they fell asleep whilst the buggy was moving, some babies will wake when it stops because they're really sensitive to what got them off to sleep in the first place. So again, that is completely normal, and again, wait for it, it depends on the baby, but it is normal. Second nap, I think, is amazing. It is normal, especially whilst their circadian rhythm is getting established. It is normal for them to for their naps to fluctuate a little bit. It would depend how long he's had at night time or what's going on around that. But I think that second nap, if you're going to prioritize any of the nap, again, is one of those things that we've got little control over. But if we are going to prioritize one nap to be the longest, I would recommend the second one. Like that first nap of the day, 30 to 40 minutes gives you no time to do anything, right? But it is a really age appropriate nap at this age to have a shorter nap. And again, if you notice, I don't think it's going on for Lucas, but if sometimes what happens if they have too long at that nap, like heading on to an hour and a half, even a little bit more, that sometimes can cause a shorter nap in the afternoon, a late nap, or sometimes even a no nap situation in the afternoon, and then that can sometimes be a little bit sticky. So sometimes capping that nap as they get older, sometimes I do cap that nap at, well, again, it very much depends on the baby. I'm so fed up of saying that, I laugh every time I say it, but sometimes between 45 minutes and an hour, I would cap that nap if it was leading to the short nap in the afternoon, but I don't think it is. My only suggestion for you would be probably 2 hours, 2 hours 15 max for that second nap.
Right.
2.5 at an absolute push, just to make sure that he's not having too much nap in one go. It evens out the nap, because believe it or not, too much nap during the day can be a thing at night time, where I don't think it is for Lucas, but for some, I'm trying to really generalize this for babies at around the 6-month mark. If they are getting too much nap during the day, that can be a thing as well. And it's a bit of chicken egg cycle. What came first? Having loads of nap during the day, waking up at night time. If it was too much nap during the day, you'd usually see a period where they were awake for quite a long time at night time. Does that make sense? So that's why I don't think that's what is going on for Lucas. But I don't think I would suggest any more than 2 hours 15, 2.5 hours max for that second nap. And again, that third nap, really normal to need a cat nap at this age. Don't believe, again, boom, they get to 6 months and every baby can scrap that cat nap, because they're all really different. And again, it depends on the baby, but it's more important to keep that nap in. If he needs that nap, you're better off giving him that nap rather than not having it and him getting overtired. He'll drop it when he's ready, but I do think it's sensible to be at around 4:30, 5 o'clock, and 20 minutes, 30 minutes max.
Fabulous.
And then bedtime, I think, is working as well.
He does seem to, because he'll go down. My issue isn't necessarily getting him down. My issue is getting him to stay down.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
It's ridiculous. He will go down. He doesn't fight it. And it doesn't take him. It took him a long time the other night for some reason, but it doesn't. I think I tried to send him to bed too early, but it doesn't take him a long time to go to bed. He just will not stay down.
Yeah, I honestly, you are not alone, Emma. I hear this probably on the daily, that I have no problem getting them to bed. It's keeping them down. That's the problem, or the sticking point. I might think that babies are problems, but you know that. I really don't. Whatever's going on for him at night, I really don't think it's going on for his naps, because his naps are pretty much nailed. And he's got a really decent bedtime as well. Bedtime, one thing, if there are frequent wake-ups at night time, putting them to bed too early can have an impact sometimes. Like if they go to bed at before 7, some babies can wake up frequently at night time. It's a combination of that they've gone to bed too early, they haven't built up enough tide in their tank, heat pressure to keep them asleep, they might not have taken a full feed. But again, that's more just to reassure anybody listening, I don't think that's going on for Lucas.
Yeah, I have tried, because I think a few times I have tried to send him to bed too tired, because he's been rubbing his face, because he rubs his face when he's tired, but then he's not been yawning or any other of his other signs. So I think, and then he gets whingy. I think he gets whingy because he gets bored sometimes, or he's starting to get tired. But like you said, I don't think he's been tired enough, and I have on occasion tried to send him to bed too early.
Yeah, I think we all have. And it is normal. But just because, I think this is a really good point as well, just because it's normal to look through everything as overtiredness, and I definitely don't help that conversation sometimes, but it is normal for them to rub their eye, especially as they get older, rub their eyes, do a little yawn. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready for bed right then.
Yeah.
And as you found out, taking them up too early, that you can't control when they fall asleep. I think sometimes we forget that with all the content, with everything going on. Sleep is a biological process, and if we do start too early, then it just takes longer and everybody gets a bit more hot and bothered, which is not great for anybody.
No.
Did you have any questions about naps, or are you happy to look at bedtime routine and bedtime boundaries?
No, I think you've pretty much answered everything, any other questions that I would have had. And if you say that it sounds fine, because I did wonder, but because obviously with the constant naps on the go, I didn't know whether that would be an issue for him. Obviously, when you put him to bed, he won't, because obviously they're stationary when they go to bed, as opposed to he has to have his naps on the go. But if they're fine to be on the go, and then that's fine, I have no problem with that.
Again, I'm not his expert, you are, and I don't know him. We're doing this completely off the cuff, aren't we, Emma? Like, we had a quick chat before, but that's it, because I wanted it to be as honest and realistic as possible. So I really don't know him. But 2 things I want to share is, where I think I mentioned it before, where or how he goes down for naps is very, very, it's not impossible. If I've learned anything working with families for years, is nothing is impossible, but it's so rare. It's never happened on my approach that I would change where or how they go to sleep, even with movement or contact naps on you in a car. I wouldn't change that to help with sleeping at night time. I don't think he's waking up every 2 hours at night time going, I think I walked for my nap. I think I need that now. I feel that bedtime routine and bedtime boundaries resets all of that. That's one thing. And hand on heart, I've never in practice come back and looked at that. I wouldn't change how a baby at any age, but especially at 6.5 months old, how or where they go to sleep to improve how they go down at bedtime, what they're doing at night time. They're two different things. But I do feel that he is quite sensitive to the bedtime boundary. You're familiar with the bedtime boundary theory? I'm going to do a very quick summary for everybody listening. So bedtime boundary is simply how they go to sleep: walking in a pram, feeding, bouncing. I nearly said clubbing. I mean patting. I do not suggest clubbing your baby. That's what I'm saying at all. Dancing, all of these things, they're not negative sleep association, sleep clocks. They're just normal ways of getting your baby to sleep. Again, like most things on my approach, it's very much dependent on your baby. Some babies you can rock, feed, bounce, pat, sing, dance, put them to sleep in another room, and they will either sleep through the night or they'll wake up for the feeds they genuinely need. The feeds are sustainable. Where some babies, how they go to sleep really impacts the stitching of the sleep cycles, because they wake up as their stitching coming out of their sleep cycle, they realise that the bouncing has stopped, the feeding has stopped, they're not on you, they're in a different place, and that can, for some babies, impact them going into their next sleep cycle. They'll wake and then they need whatever happened at the beginning of the sleep in order to stitch their sleep cycle together. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's a spectrum. On one end of the scale, you've got it. For some, you can feed, rock, bounce, pat, do all of those things. It doesn't impact them at all. I just believe some babies are just more sensitive to how they go to that change than others. And for some babies, it's rare that it gets to this point, but for some families it isn't until baby is putting themselves it's got nothing to do with self-soothing or self-settling, nothing. But it isn't until baby's falling asleep in their cot, sometimes with the parents out of the room at bedtime, which can feel like a mammoth task, that the sleep settles at night time, and basically that there's no change. And I have a feeling Lucas might be to do with his bedtime boundary, because as soon as that buggy stops and he clocked on that there's a change, he then needs the movement again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but changing bedtime boundaries, as you found out, Emma, it is a biggie. And again, it does look different for every family. Some families, that making those changes, it's fairly straightforward, where for some it carry out works because they put the work in to really step it down and make changes. So at the moment, talk to me how Lucas goes to sleep at bedtime.
So he gets fed to sleep at bedtime. He went through a phase of letting Dad bounce him to sleep or letting me bounce him to sleep, but because when we tried the boundaries is to roll it back from slowly roll it back from, so feeding to sleep is what he's always done. So we tried to roll it back from feeding to sleep, or I'd do it where I looked at your thing where you said the breast request, so where I would take it away from him and then rock him to see if he would just go to sleep, and sometimes he would and sometimes he wouldn't, so I'd have to give it him back and wait till he'd gone to sleep to put him down. And then we tried the rocking to sleep, which worked for a bit, but now we're back. We've been back for about a month now, where there's just refusal for anything else apart from being fed to sleep.
Yeah, okay. My suggestion would be to go very slowly. I think it is worth just checking in, seeing if there's anything else that can be done with the eczema. To see if it could well be that he's waking up because he's in discomfort, he's scratching, and then he's awake. So then he needs the feed to soothe him, help him, comfort him to get back to sleep. But at bedtime, I think the more I speak to Emma, the more I've got a sneaky sleep suspicion it is his bedtime boundary. He as soon as he wakes up, the reason why I think this is, one, that you instinctively feel that resonates and makes sense, but also at night time sometimes he's not even taking a really big feed. He'll have a quick suckle, little kiss, and then he's straight back to sleep. And the wake ups are frequent. So I do think the next sensible step would be to work on bedtime boundaries, but do it really slowly. It is normal for the unlatching them off the breast not to work. It is a process, and as I mentioned before, some babies find that even more frustrating. There's a couple of things you can try if you want to. These are just suggestions, but what you could try to do is, does he wear a sleeping bag?
He does, yeah.
Yeah. Or what you could, even if he doesn't wear a sleeping bag, because again, I'm just bearing in mind that we were talking about him being too hot with the eczema, what you could try and do is, instead of moving, like unlatching him before he falls asleep, you could try introducing something afterwards. Does that make sense? So my whole approach, instead of taking something away, try and build in some really small steps after he's had his boob, and always breastfeed. Sorry, I didn't mean to be, I call it booby in practice. I didn't mean to be to offend anybody with the word boob, just in case. But my suggestion, and also the other thing I want to be very, very clear about, you don't need to stop. Before I go through these suggestions, the boobs are never to blame. They're not a bad habit. You don't need to stop breastfeeding. Sometimes it's enough just to get a little bit of a break between going to bed and having the breastfeed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So my suggestion for you, if you are up for it, I do feel your bedtime routine is working, because he's going to sleep afterwards. That's very, very telling. If the naps weren't working or the bedtime routine wasn't working, 9 times out of 10 you'd get some resistance going down. But that's why I don't think it's anything to do with that. But my suggestion to you would be to see whether you can swap bump the breastfeed earlier up the bedtime routine, and put, like, I'd probably do you bath him every night?
Not every night, no, because it dries the skin out. So we do the same routine, but sometimes we don't do the bath part.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. My suggestion would be to get him into his nappy. So if he has a bath him, keep it short, into his nappy. Then I would feed him, and then I would put his pajamas on, and then see whether you can hold him to sleep that way.
Right. Okay.
I have a feeling that the unlatching him just drove him bonkers, which is really normal. I see that quite a bit in practice, that they just find it really frustrating. And for some, when you unlatch them, they're always going to come back to the boob. Does that make sense? They just get more and more frustrated. And it just doesn't work. So my suggestions for your bedtime boundaries are, I would probably try starting your routine and bedtime just 5 or 10 minutes earlier. Nothing too crazy, but give you and Lucas just a teeny little bit more time to make that change. That could be all the difference between him actually accepting a change at bedtime. And we have to remember that change is strange at any age. Adults find it really difficult to make changes. Recently, my phone, a great example of this is, recently my phone got upgraded and I couldn't figure out how to do anything, and it honestly all day it drove me bonkers, which is ridiculous. I'm a grown woman and I couldn't figure out how to do something. Change is strange. It feels clunky, it feels unsmooth, it's normal. So why should it be any different for babies, especially for a baby as young as Lucas at 6 months old? It is going to take time, and there's often a period of adjustment. And again, I think sometimes people think Care It Out is this magical unicorn approach that just happens. It just, you kind of look at them and the changes are made. Again, it takes time and practice and patience, and for some families it can definitely be a process. But yeah, to keep it on, I feel like I'm waffling now, but keep it on point. My suggestions at bedtime would be to start a little bit earlier, because that can make a difference. Nothing crazy, just 5 or 10 minutes. And my suggestion would be, instead of unlatching him and trying to do it that way, I would suggest bumping the breastfeed up the bedtime routine a little bit. It'll only be about 5 minutes, but then try and get him dressed afterwards. And I'm hoping for some babies, by doing that, what we're doing is bumping the breastfeed up the bedtime routine, not the last thing.
Yeah.
But we are also, does it make sense? So that it won't be the last thing, but instead of taking something away, we're adding something in, and he would have already hopefully finished his feed. Like, it's normal if you're feeding them. If something, like, for example, I was having my cup of coffee, which I just realised is completely empty, and somebody kept taking that cup of coffee away from me, I would give up. I would kick off 100%. And some babies do accept it, some don't. I think it's really individual. But I'm hoping by adding something in afterwards, the pajamas, the song, or even if you just did the sleeping bag afterwards, he'll have finished his feed. It will be up the routine. There won't be any unlatching him because he'll have finished. But that jostle of doing something afterwards, the pajamas, and for anybody listening, you can do anything afterwards. You could have a song, you could say goodnight, a couple of things. You could you could zip up their sleeping bag. It could even be that first step, something as simple as just not being cute when you're transferring them into the cot. You just put them into the cot. It's not about being rough. I wouldn't go and wake them up. We're just making that break between the breastfeed and going to bed, and we're also just making them aware of where they're going, and that can really help at night time. Oh, you there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that definitely, it makes sense. Yeah, because at least it's not a shock for them.
You're writing it all down. Yeah, I would try really hard not to make it shock, but I think you've just got a little bit stuck with changing the bedtime boundary, which happens. I see it in practice all the time. But again, probably on the weekly where that happens, and sometimes change. I'm all for making changes over time, giving it time, accepting that it's a process, but sometimes knowing when to actually, this isn't working, we've tried it, it's time to try something completely different, can help massively.
Fabulous.
And in the beginning, final parting piece of advice, because I knew this was going to happen, we'd have loads to talk about, Emma. I'm going to have to go in a second.
No, it's fine, I'm the same.
But it's been so nice talking to you. I just really, I genuinely really enjoy it. But he will be quite tired in the beginning. Like, he might not even wake up when you put his pajamas on or his sleeping bag on. That's fine. I would keep doing it. And again, the more we practice something, the more we repeat, repetition comes up a lot in my practice. It just helps him adjust to that change. And in time, he might get a little bit more awake. And I'm really hoping that's enough then to move you forward. And once you've done that, then you can just continue to bump the breastfeed up the routine that way.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. Has that made total sense? Because that's really important to me. I'm not just going to rush off, by the way.
No, it definitely does make sense.
Total sense. And you're happy with that?
I am, yes.
There's nothing I think I would much rather. I'm never going to stop creating content because I love it. I would always I talk so much better than I type, and there is nothing beats talking to you, their expert, and actually having that chat and getting it into context to help move you forward. But do you feel a little bit more confident now about where you're going with bedtime boundaries?
Yeah, I do. It's like a bit of a plan is always. I love a plan, so it's always
me too. I love a plan. In fact, what goes on my plan during the day, if it's not on my plan, it doesn't happen. That's how the only way I can keep myself organised. Yeah, amazing. And most parents like a plan. It makes us feel that we've got some control over it. It's easy to stick to something when it's a plan as well, I think.
Yeah, true.
Cool. And then just very quickly, because I know somebody will ask this on the back of this podcast, at night time we don't change anything. The only time I ever change what we're doing at night time is if we've worked on bedtime boundaries and that hasn't worked, or we're looking at night weaning, which I would always need a chat for anyway. I only offer weaning advice in consultations for now, because again, it looks different for every family and I need to have that chat. But at night time, the two most important things at night time is A, that we are giving them the practice and patience to stitch their sleep together, and B, we're supporting them straight away if they're asking. Now for Lucas, you've already told me at the beginning that he is upset, he's crying when he wakes up, so he's already asking for support. So I would go in and roll up your response. I wouldn't change anything at night, Emma, for you. Okay. Roll up as soon as he's crying. It's always okay to stitch your sleep cycles together. Roll up your response. If you get to feeding, I'm hoping by very slowly getting a bigger break at bedtime, that's the key to nudging him forward at night time. But for anybody else listening, if you do find that your baby wakes up at night time and they do coo, they're awake, but they're emotionally easy, chatting, cooing, playing, my suggestion would be to give them that practice and patience to stitch, pause and give them that practice and patience to stitch their sleep cycle. I'd only be going in if they were emotionally uneasy.
Fabulous.
Cool. Emma, it's been so nice talking to you. That is a long episode, but I'm really hoping lots of parents find that useful. As I said before, these consultation type episodes always go down really well. The main thing though, Emma, is have you enjoyed it, and do you feel you've got something out of it?
Yes, I've very much enjoyed it, and I do feel like I've got a plan, so I feel much better about it.
Good. That's all I ever want for anybody, especially for you, Emma, because you're so lovely giving me your time, is that you feel better. It's good to feel good. You feel reassured. You've got a plan in place.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to leave you in peace for the rest of the day, Emma.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Will you keep me posted and let me know how you get on, Emma?
I will do. Yes, thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much for
You
coming and
too.
talking to me. Bye.
Thanks. Easy. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to me, your host Kerry Secker, on the Carry It Out Sleep Show. I really hope you found this podcast episode reassuring, informative, but most importantly, it helps you and your small to a more settled night's sleep the caring way. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the show below, leave me some feedback, or share it with a parent pal. I love hearing that you love listening. My next podcast episode will be available in 2 weeks' time. But if you really can't wait that long, please come and find me over on Instagram at Care It Out Sleep Consultant. I update my sleep squares and speak about sleep there on the daily. Big love and sleep solidarity. Until next time.